The modern world is characterized by a strange and pervasive paradox. We possess unprecedented access to information, material comfort, and instant communication, yet we are defined by an enduring, deep-seated sense of searching. We are perpetually pursuing more success, more validation, more pleasure, a pursuit that somehow never delivers the promised satisfaction. This condition is often masked by anxiety, chronic dissatisfaction, and an existential hunger that no amount of consumption or achievement seems capable of filling. We sense a fundamental misalignment between who we are and what we truly desire, leaving us adrift in a sea of fleeting commitments and fragmented attention. If you have ever felt this profound spiritual ailment, this ceaseless internal engine that cannot find its resting place, then you are ready to meet St. Augustine of Hippo. He was not merely a theologian or a bishop. He was the first great philosopher of the inner life, a genius who diagnosed the universal spiritual disease of humanity 17 centuries ago. Augustine's brilliance lies in his capacity to articulate the human condition with startling clarity, drawing directly from his own tumultuous, intellectual, and morally conflicted youth. His primary insight cuts through all the noise of our contemporary struggles and provides a foundational thesis for human existence itself. That thesis is immortalized in the opening lines of his spiritual autobiography, The Confessions, a declaration that serves as the bedrock for all his subsequent philosophy and theology. He writes, "You have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you." This is far more than a simple devotional statement. It is a profound philosophical claim about the structural nature of human desire. Augustine argues that the human soul is intentionally designed with an infinite capacity, a void that can only be filled by the infinite. Every human endeavor, whether it is the frantic chase for wealth, the artistic drive for beauty, the scientific search for truth, or the desperate grasp for political power, is ultimately a misdirected search for this divine rest. We are all seeking God, Augustine suggests, whether we know it or not, but we are often looking for the infinite in finite, perishable places. The enduring relevance of Augustine is that he provides solutions to our most pressing contemporary problems that seem uniquely modern but are, in fact, timeless manifestations of that original restlessness. We will explore three major problems of contemporary life that Augustine's thought uniquely solves. We must first confront the problem one, the fragmented self and internal conflict. Then we will tackle problem two, the anxiety of time and the lost present. Finally, we will address problem three, the problem of evil and moral disorder. The modern quest for identity is perhaps the most confusing and exhausting journey of our time. Society constantly encourages an outward gaze, instructing us to define our worth and our essence through external validation. We define ourselves by the curated image we present on social media, the professional title we hold, or the opinions others project onto us. This outward orientation leads to an inherent instability. If your identity is built on external, changeable factors, then your sense of self is constantly vulnerable to external, changeable forces. If the validation stops, the self crumbles. Augustine proposes a radical reversal of direction. The path to truth, identity, and stability is not outward, but inward. It is a demanding journey of self-reflection and spiritual excavation, a deep plunge into the recesses of the soul. He famously lamented the human tendency to ignore the internal drama while obsessing over external marvels. He noted, "Men go abroad to admire the heights of mountains, the mighty waves of the sea, the broad tides of rivers, the compass of the ocean and the circuits of the stars, yet pass over the mystery of themselves without a thought." This is the Augustinian critique of superficiality. We are fascinated by creation, yet we neglect the most immediate and profound mystery, the mystery of the soul itself. We must turn the gaze inward, not to discover our ego, but to discover the source of immutable truth residing within. Augustine's psychological masterpiece is his unflinching analysis of the fragmented will. the core issue preventing us from achieving the good we recognize. He details his own agonizing moral struggle, describing the internal battle with heartbreaking honesty. He experienced his inner self as a house divided against itself, a conflict where he simultaneously desired the divine truth and clung desperately to habitual destructive pleasures. This division is the central tragedy of the human moral life. He provides a simple, devastating analogy for this internal conflict. The mind commands the body, and the body instantly obeys. If the mind wills the hand to move, it moves without question. Yet the mind commands itself. For example, the mind commands the will to stop pursuing a harmful addiction, and it meets resistance. Why does the self resist the self? This illustrates the profound division between the intellect, which recognizes the good, and the will, which is crippled and fragmented following the moral injury of the original disobedience often called the fall. The contemporary relevance of this insight is staggering. The struggle with addiction, the paralysis of procrastination, the consistent pattern of self-sabotage, all these modern afflictions are manifestations of this ancient, divided will. One part of the self genuinely desires the highest good, but a deeper, habituated part chooses the lesser good, or even the outright harmful. We suffer not because we are ignorant of what is right, but because we lack the internal integrity, the unified will, to execute the good we know. Augustine gives us the vocabulary to understand why we fail to follow through on our best intentions. The Augustinian antidote to this fragmentation begins with the radical call to return to yourself. But this inward journey is not narcissism. It is the first step toward finding God. For Augustine, God is not merely external or distant. He is intimately present in the very structure of our being. He articulated the theological concept of God as being more inward to me than the most inward part of me, and higher than my highest reach. This means that the deepest, most authentic self we could ever discover is precisely the point where we encounter the divine presence, the source of all truth and wisdom. True self-knowledge, therefore, is inseparable from the knowledge of God. We cannot understand our own nature, our deep restlessness, or our infinite potential until we recognize the Creator who designed us for Himself. This insight pulls us out of the chaos of external validation and grounds us in the immutable truth residing within our spiritual core. Moving beyond the internal fragmentation of the self, we encounter the second great problem of contemporary life, the tyranny of time. We live under the constant pressure of a future we must plan and a past we must regret, leading to a profound, almost pathological inability to simply exist fully in the present moment. This temporal anxiety defines the modern condition. We are always rushing toward the next thing, measuring our lives by future deadlines and past failures, feeling that the present, the only moment we actually possess, slips through our fingers like sand. Augustine, in Book 11 of the Confessions, launches into a philosophical inquiry into time that remains arguably the most famous and challenging analysis in all of Western philosophy. He wrestled openly with the mystery of temporality, recognizing its immediate reality yet its ultimate elusiveness. He captures the essence of this paradox with his famous question, "What then is time? If no one asks me, I know what it is. If I wish to explain it to him who asks me, I do not know." We intuitively grasp time, yet it defies concrete definition or measurement. Augustine realizes that the difficulty lies in trying to treat time as a physical object. How can we measure the future which does not yet exist? How can we measure the past which has ceased to exist? We only measure the present, but the present itself is a fleeting, dimensionless point between the non-existent past and the non-existent future. His radical conclusion is that the past and the future do not exist in objective reality. They exist only as dimensions of the human soul. Time is not a substance outside of us. It is a psychological extension, a stretching out of the mind itself. He identifies three forms of the present that reside within the human soul, all of which allow us to perceive and measure duration. There is the present of past things, which is memory, the present of present things, which is direct experience or intuition, and the present of future things, which is expectation. When we measure a duration, such as the length of a spoken sentence or a musical performance, we are not measuring the external sounds themselves, but the psychological impression they leave, the stretching of our memory and expectation. The entire duration is held simultaneously in the mind. This leads to his profound statement. So it is in you, my mind, that I measure periods of time. Time, as we experience it, is fundamentally a psychological phenomenon, an extension of the soul that he calls the distension of the mind. This analysis is revolutionary because it provides the key to understanding temporal anxiety. We suffer because our soul is stretched thin, pulled constantly between the regretful memory of what was and the anxious expectation of what will be. We are psychologically fragmented across the timeline. The spiritual solution to this tyranny of time lies in contrasting our changeable, extended, created time with the unchangeable, ever-present nature of the Creator. God does not experience time sequentially like we do. God's existence is an eternal present. God is outside of created time, dwelling in a simplicity and unity that knows no succession. When we orient our fragmented soul toward this divine, simple, and unchanging eternity, we begin to heal the internal stretching and fragmentation. The practice of spiritual life, therefore, becomes the discipline of shifting our focus. We move from the fleeting, extended present of our anxious soul to the simple, unified, and continuous present of God. This allows us to find rest in the moment, living fully in the unceasing now by centering our memory and expectation on the divine source. This brings us to the third immense problem, one that has plagued philosophers and ordinary people for millennia, the problem of evil and moral disorder. How can a good, all-powerful God permit the existence of evil and suffering in the world? This intellectual challenge, known as the problem of theodicy, was deeply personal for Augustine. Before his conversion, he was a follower of Manichaeism, a dualistic religion that solved the problem simply by positing that evil was a separate, eternal substance locked in perpetual combat with the good God. Augustine's mature theology offered a decisive rejection of this dualism, providing the foundational Christian answer to the problem of evil. His solution is elegant, profound, and often misunderstood. Evil is not a thing or a created substance. If evil were a substance, God would have had to create it, which contradicts his perfect goodness, or it would have to be an eternal, uncreated rival force, which contradicts his omnipotence. Augustine solved this dilemma by defining evil as a privation of good. Evil is understood not as a positive creation, but as a lack, a defect, or a hole where goodness ought to be. It is like darkness, which is not a substance but merely the absence of light. It is like sickness, which is not a positive entity, but the absence of health. Evil, therefore, is parasitic. It can only exist by clinging to something good that it corrupts. A wicked person is not purely evil. They are a good person whose goodness has been diminished or twisted. The creation remains fundamentally good, but it is capable of being corrupted. This leads directly to the core cause of moral evil, the misuse of free will. God created everything good, including the faculty of free will, which is a magnificent gift that allows for true love and moral responsibility. The possibility of moral evil arises precisely because God created changeable good things. These created things, unlike God, can change for the worse. When the rational creature, endowed with free will, chooses a lesser, changeable good over the supreme, unchangeable good, God, that choice introduces moral disorder. The problem, Augustine insists, is not that God created evil, but that the creature used its good freedom to turn away from the highest good. This turning away is the essence of sin. Augustine's most impactful contribution to ethics and spirituality is his definition of sin as fundamentally a problem of misplaced affection, a moral error best described as disordered love. He calls this the order of love. Sin is not merely the violation of a rule, it is a fundamental misdirection of the will, where we assign ultimate value to things that are only meant to be secondary. It is loving created things, pleasures, power, possessions, or even the self, more than the creator, the uncreated good. For example, money is good, but if you love money more than justice, you have disordered love, which leads to theft and exploitation. Food is good, but if you love the pleasure of food more than the health of your body or the needs of your neighbor, you have disordered love, which leads to gluttony and selfishness. Augustine summarized his own struggle with this concept. For my sin was that I sought out pleasures, grandeurs, and truths not in him but in his creatures, in myself and in others, and thus fell headlong into sorrows, confusion, and errors. The consequence of this moral error is immediate and inescapable. The punishment of every disordered mind is its own disorder. When we choose chaos over order, when we love the lesser good more than the highest good, the result is the internal misery, confusion, and external chaos that we experience in our personal lives and in our societies. The solution to the fragmented self, the anxiety of time, and the chaos of moral disorder is ultimately one unified solution: the reorientation of the will, which is the complete reordering of one's loves. This is the heart of the Augustinian spiritual life. To find rest, we must establish the correct hierarchy of affection, loving God supremely and loving everything else in relation to Him. The measure of love for God, Augustine suggested, is to love without measure, but Augustine was keenly aware that the fragmented, wounded will cannot simply pull itself up by its own bootstraps. Having diagnosed the profound incapacity of the human will after the moral injury, he understood that human effort alone is insufficient to achieve ordered love. This is where the concept of divine grace enters his theology with tremendous power. We require God's freely given strength, His grace, to do what our crippled will cannot do on its own. This realization led to one of his most famous prayers, a paradoxical plea for divine assistance. Grant what you command and command what you will. This prayer acknowledges that God commands us to live justly and love rightly, but that only God can provide the inner strength, the renewed will to actually fulfill those commands. Grace is the medicine for the divided soul. While the Confessions deals primarily with the inner life, Augustine's masterwork, The City of God, provides the grand social and political solution to human history, extending the concept of ordered love to the entire human community. This massive work, written in response to the fall of Rome, provides a timeless framework for understanding the conflict and complexity of human civilization. He posits that all of humanity is divided into two metaphorical communities or cities, defined not by geography or politics, but by their fundamental underlying loves. The two cities are defined by two antithetical loves. There is the earthly city, which is founded on the love of self, a love that is pursued even to the contempt of God. This love manifests in the relentless pursuit of earthly power, glory, and temporary satisfaction. Opposite this is the heavenly city, which is founded on the pure love of God, a love pursued even to the contempt of the self. This love manifests in humility, justice, and the pursuit of eternal peace. This framework is a powerful and timeless critique of all human institutions and ideologies. Any government, any culture, any economic system, and any personal ambition is ultimately judged by the quality of its underlying love. Does it serve the love of self or the love of God? Augustine understood that these two cities are intertwined on earth. No earthly institution, not even the church, is purely the city of God, and no nation is purely the earthly city. The Christian life is therefore defined as a pilgrimage, living within the earthly city while orienting the heart toward the heavenly one. This tension creates a unique spiritual posture characterized by a fierce realistic hope. Augustine's thought inspires us to engage with the world, seeking justice and order, but never mistaking temporary human arrangements for ultimate fulfillment. The Augustinian pilgrim holds two essential virtues that summarize his enduring contribution to spiritual psychology. These are the two daughters of hope: First, the anger that things are the way they are, and second, the courage to make them the way they ought to be. He does not offer passive resignation, but active engagement fueled by eternal hope. He teaches us that true happiness is to rejoice in the truth, and since God is the truth, true happiness is to rejoice in God. This is the ultimate rest for the restless heart. Augustine's personal journey is the living proof of his philosophy. The complexity of his mind, the intensity of his moral struggles, and the eventual unity he found in faith are chronicled with devastating honesty. His solutions flow directly from his lived experience, showing that the path from intellectual wandering and moral paralysis to profound rest is real and attainable. If you wish to delve into the source of these revolutionary ideas, to witness the raw human struggle that birthed this theology, you must turn to the foundational spiritual autobiography that changed Western thought forever. That book is the Confessions of St. Augustine. It is here that Augustine details his personal evolution from paganism and intellectual confusion through the deep skepticism of Manichaeism and finally into the light of Christian understanding. The book is not merely historical, it is a timeless exploration of sin, memory, grace, and the very nature of human desire. Reading the Confessions allows you to walk alongside the man who discovered the architecture of the inner life, providing a powerful mirror for your own spiritual journey and helping you diagnose the sources of your own restlessness. It is an essential companion for anyone serious about understanding the Augustinian solutions we have discussed today. This particular edition is available in a large print edition, which might be helpful for easier reading as you absorb the density of his profound reflections. You can find a link to this essential text in the description below. Augustine's final poetic confession serves as the ultimate invitation to all who feel stretched thin and exhausted by the search. Late have I loved you, beauty so very ancient and so ever new. Late I have loved you. You were within, but I was without. St. Augustine matters today because he looks past the superficial solutions of our age, past the distractions of technology, the promises of consumerism, and the tyranny of external validation, and points directly to the eternal source of rest and unity. He confirms that the deepest problems of the human heart are solved only by finding the ultimate destination for which we were fundamentally designed. If these words speak to you, you're not here by chance. Subscribe, like, and share your thoughts below. Each simple action helps this message reach more hearts and reminds me that this work still has meaning.